Hello and welcome to Luminate's 2025 Midyear Music Report. I am Jamie Markinet, Vice President, Music Insights and Industry Relations. I'm based out of Nashville, Tennessee, but here we are in New York City.
Hi, I'm Lexi Chickles. I'm a senior manager on the Insights team. I am also based in New York, and I'm really excited to take you all through our webinar today. So a couple housekeeping items. Today's session will be recorded, so you can watch it whenever you like. And as for the actual report, it is live. It has both an interactive version and a downloadable version available at luminatedata.com. We are going to be going through the highlights today and some of the things we're really excited about, but there's a lot more detail in the report, so please go check it out after this.
Excellent, excellent. So, understanding that there are probably some people who have not been to one of our webinars before, want to do a little bit of a company intro for you as well and let you know who we are and where these numbers are coming from. So, Luminate has more than 500 daily sources of data. We have streaming and physical data coming directly from providers here in the US as well as Canada, and we have data through our UI for 60 other countries in streaming data that we're going to be talking about. Some of the notes and figures on the screen just give a sense of scale to the data, and when you add in that there's 105,000 new ISRCs hitting platforms every day, it's just astronomical. But what I think is fascinating is also some of the stories that make up this data, which is what we're going to be diving into today. In terms of Luminate's products, music is what we're going to be primarily talking about today. We have consumption, but we also have a metadata and data enrichment service. We have a film and TV side of the business. Streaming viewership model is one of their key products, putting minutes watched to streaming video on demand. You may have seen those charts in Variety. We also have very deep, rich film and data, film and TV metadata, and then our insights, custom research, and consultation. Obviously, a lot of people also know as the official data provider for the Billboard charts here in the US, Canada, and globally as well.
Awesome. So quick overview of today's webinar. We are going to be looking through topics such as the music metrics halfway through the year. We're going to be mapping out how fans and other influences have impacted consumption of music globally. Then we're going to look at how some of those factors have shifted the music ecosystem. Then we're going to look at how superfans have grown, how to become a superfan, and how to capitalize on their value. And then we're going to be getting a first look at our new quantified artist ranking system that we've honed in on highlighting potential rising stars using the Luminate Index. And finally, we'll touch on a few key emerging trends and some things that we're really excited about.
So when we're starting to jump in, I want to make sure that when we're talking about trending, what we're looking at. We're looking at the first 26 weeks of this year versus the first 26 weeks of last year. So in these next couple of slides, you're going to see year-over-year change, you're going to see SharePoint change, and just know that what we're looking at is the first half of this year versus the first half of last year. Now, overall, global on-demand audio streams are up 10.3%. This is mostly driven by ex-US markets. You can see right here up 12.6% as well. Through the first 26 weeks of this year, there were actually 200 billion more global on-demand audio streams through 26 weeks than there were last year. Looking at some of the US metrics now, you can see that the on-demand audio streaming growth in the US does continue to slow. You'll see that 4.6% over last year. Now that does equal about 31 billion more streams at this point in the calendar than there was last year. So it is continuing to grow. It's not growing as fast though. I think in last year's mid-year report, we were up about 50 billion new streams. So that really kind of indicates the growth is slowing. But overall, the US still does account for about 30% of the global on-demand numbers. I do want to talk about some of the physical numbers. We do have a new indie modeling methodology that's applied to the indie retail sector, and we're really pleased and proud to have those numbers reflected here. You can see that total album sales for physical down 3.2%, but I want to call out Taylor Swift's impact here because the Tortured Poets department came out last year, and I was looking at our system this morning, and there were 3.6 million physical units sold in the first half of last year. So when we're looking at these numbers, I think it's really important to understand what we're comping against, right? So if we pulled out Taylor Swift, because that was such a monumental release. Overall, physical albums, instead of being down 3.2%, if you pull Taylor Swift out, it's up 5.5%. The U.S. total album sales, physical and digital, instead of declining by 6%, would be up almost 2%. And then vinyl as well. Vinyl currently is up 2%, but if you remove Taylor's album, it would be up almost 8%. So want to call that out when you're looking at these numbers as well. And again, when we go through the rest of these details, we're not going to be reading every single note from every single slide. We're just going to go through the highlights, and I'm going to push you one more time to encourage you to go check out the interactive version as well as the downloadable version.
In this section, we're going to be looking at how music, fandom, and other influences move around the world. To start the section off, we've surmised that streaming has accounted for 92% of the music consumption in the first half of the year, which is a huge number. And with that comes many more shifts in genre dynamics, evolving audiences, which we'll be taking a look at through the rest of the session.
Thanks, Lexi. So let's jump in with the top genres. R&B hip-hop remains the market leader. This has been a long-standing position for the core genre, but its share has declined as other genres have grown. And we're going to start talking about those other genres that are growing, but a couple of interesting call-outs here. I want to note Christian gospel music in particular. This is something that we called out in our year-end report as well, but the interesting thing that we're seeing is that this genre is really starting to grow, and it actually moved from the 8th position to the 7th position, passing world music. Now, world music includes K-pop, includes Afro beats, includes musical genres that are not native to North America, and so this was a pretty big jump for Christian gospel to move up to the 7th position there. But overall, these shifts really highlight evolving audience preferences and consumption patterns. One of my favorite slides that we always talk about is the growing genres. And the genre that grew its share of streaming the most so far this year was rock. And you see a picture of Sleep Token here. Sleep Token and Ghost both had Billboard #1 albums on the Billboard 200. I think that they were just about 2 weeks apart. That hadn't happened for hard rock in about a decade, so very, very big there. And the reason why we're looking at share point change is we're thinking of streaming as one big pie. So when we talk about growth genres, it's what genre grew its piece of the pie the most this half year versus last half year. You also see Latin and country. Obviously, we've talked about those for a couple of years. Christian gospel, which we just noted. And then I want to call out blues. Blues is the #5 top growth genre, and this is really because of the Sinners soundtrack, the film impact, and the adjacent activity. We've seen artists like Buddy Guy and their streaming go up as well. So it really shows how, sort of all of entertainment is connected, and how film and TV can also drive, pretty big genre movements as well.
Yeah, sync is really having a moment. This year already. For
sure, and I can't wait to dive into a couple of more things a little bit later in the presentation too on this. In terms of subgenres, I think that one of the key call out here is really starting to look at how subgenres drive overall genre growth. Now, in our system, it's important to note that one particular song can have multiple subgenres. If a pop song gets an EDM remix, you can tag it at a subgenre level as both of those. So important to note out, but you see the alt rock leads, but then you see regional Mexican, R&B, hard rock, and Christian are in the top 5 in terms of volume growth for subgenres. R&B is a really, really interesting one. We just spoke about how R&B hip hop share has declined, and when we look at current music, we're going to see that as well. But R&B, on the other hand, is actually placing as a top subgenre in growth for the first time in about 3 years, which is really, really important, especially when you think about the other dynamics of that core genre.
Yeah, I think that especially with these sync opportunities and with these subgenres, there's a lot that can come in and change how the subgenres grow. And something that we've seen in the last week or two is with the new Netflix movie K-pop Demon Hunters. It has its own K-pop soundtrack, and it's received a lot of attention. So the movie is funneling new fans into the genre, and we'll report back and see what interesting findings we have. But there are 2 songs already in the top 10. For this week, and I watched it. I loved it. And now I'm listening to more K-pop music, and I've listened to the whole new Twice album.
Yeah, fantastic. And BTS is coming back, so definitely keep an eye on K-pop over the next year or two.
So here we've taken a look at a couple of the high growth genres. We're looking at R&B, hard rock, and Christian music. So we want to take a deeper look at who's driving it and what other behaviors are contributing to the growth. Some of the unique attributes for each of the subgenres are that R&B streamers, they're more likely to be female, they're more likely to be Gen Z, and they're also more likely to discover music on Twitch. These fans also enjoy listening to music outside of their favorite genres, so they're eclectic, they're interested, and there's a lot of room to activate this group there.
And the younger fans too, right? Like Gen Z, kind of what we're speaking to about how R&B's had good growth this year. Gen Z, that really bodes well for the future too.
Yeah, and I love R&B, so I'm excited for it to hopefully come back more. So with the hard rock genre, these streamers are more likely to be male, millennial, and they're also more likely to find music through video games. And they're also way more likely to listen to music on vinyl. So again, these nuances and differences make it, they offer paths to activate them more directly. Next, we have Christian music streamers. So these folks are more likely to be female, millennial, and they're also more likely to discover music through pre-made playlists, and they like to listen to their favorite songs on repeat. So again, understanding the nuances of these behaviors can really help to engage whoever you're trying to reach.
That's fascinating. Lexi, do you have any suggestions on maybe a marketing tactic or something like that somebody could use to connect with one of these audiences?
Yeah, so if you're trying to reach hard rock folks, for example, setting up some type of in-game interaction or for a new rock release, or offering a limited edition vinyl with some like gaming art could be a way to capture their attention and engage them more.
Oh, cool idea. Very cool idea. Let's also talk about current music as well. I've referenced this a little bit, I think, at the beginning of the webinar, but we did see that current music declined in volume. Now, how we define current music is music that's been released within the last 18 months. That is current. And we did see that the volume dropped a little bit over 3%. Now, I want to say that this has not happened before, right? So the first questions that we asked ourselves was, okay, well, let's add some additional context around this. Has this happened before? Yes. In 2022, the volume of current music was lower than in 2021. In 2021, it was lower than 2020. So this has happened before. And when you start to dive into where it's coming from, right, you start to see that R&B hip hop as a core genre has lost the most of the current volume here. On the other hand, you see that country has actually grown the most in current volume. Morgan Wallen's new album has been at the top of the charts as well, helping to drive that, as well as other projects. But, you know, we have seen this in the past, and we're seeing it here, but also it does kind of go back to our point about R&B, and what a great story that is that R&B has grown while the core genre has lost some share and then has lost some current volume as well.
So another trend that we're seeing lately is known as Recession Pop, specifically pop music that was released from 2007 to 2012 during the Great Recession time, and it's having a bit of a resurgence. It's actually grown by 6.4%, which is more than the U.S. average, which is 4.6%. With artists like Lady Gaga and Kesha, who have music from that time, also releasing new music now, we do think that's contributing to some of that higher listening rate. But we also think that it's because it's activating some type of nostalgia for the listeners. During a time of financial unrest and uncertainty, people like to lean on the things that they like, the music that they feel comfortable with, and it could be a really cool opportunity for people to tap into that in marketing campaigns and kind of highlight this cultural era. Yeah,
for sure. And I remember that when Recession Pop came around 2007 and 2012, there was an escapism element, those sorts of things as well during the time. Also, for the financial industries, one thing is, yes, this is a period of time where we're seeing growth, but we're specifically seeing more growth within the pop genre out of this period of time, which is just interesting. And as we talk to our financial clients and whatnot, and they're always looking for, okay, yes, but what is the thing that's actually growing from this time period? And we're saying that it's pop, which is fascinating. All right, so the next trend that we're gonna cover is import-export. And to set this up a little bit, we've seen a lot of joint ventures, especially in other non-North America territories. There's been joint ventures announced in Africa and in Asia as well. And the import-export part of our trend section here really focuses on how music's moving. We've talked about global DSPs really enabling fans to hear music from all over the world and share music, and understanding how this then changes and develops is very, very key for the industry. In our year-end report last year, we debuted our new Luminate Export Power Rankings for recorded music, right? And this is built on factors including streaming rank, the countries that import the music, an artist's reach outside of their own country. And overall, our top 10 through the first half of this year remains the same top 10 that we saw in 2024. However, Brazil and Sweden have flipped. Brazil has moved up a position. And we're going to talk about Brazil a little bit more in a slide or two, but it's really, really interesting because it highlights Brazil's growing significance in terms of export as well. Now, if you go to our interactive version and our download version, you're going to see additional regions. So we're just going to hang with Middle East and Africa and Latin America here when we look at this, but I really encourage you to go and check out the other regions. What we're looking at here is the countries and specific regions that stream the most local music, the most music from outside of its own country, but from the region, and then music from outside of the region. Right, and where this has implications is you take a country like Nigeria. Nigeria actually has the highest amount of local streaming in the region. So when we're looking at JVs happening or those sorts of things, understanding the streaming makeup and where those streamings is coming from for other artists is very important, because the UAE, on the other hand, is open to the most open to imports from outside the region. Over 90% of their streams are from ex-regional artists. So if you're looking to potentially enter the region, maybe the UAE is a good place because they're already streaming so many artists from outside of the region. Or if you're looking to enter Nigeria specifically, maybe a collab with a Nigerian artist would be the way to go because the streaming is so local. Brazil, when we switch to Latin America, is really, really interesting because we just saw how it's moving up in its export rank, yet it's a very local streaming market. Nearly 3 out of 4 streams in Brazil are from a Brazilian artist. So really interesting dynamics because it's a very distinctive and local leaning market, yet it's also starting to reach new levels of success in its exports as well, which is really fascinating. So a couple notes on why this is really, really important and interesting for the music industry. Obviously, we talked about trade relationships. You can also start to identify music trade clusters here, by seeing which countries are local or most open to the region or ex-region. You can start to really identify how music moves. You can start looking at your market entry strategies, what we talked about. And then also, there's an understanding of nativism and global openness, right? So this analysis reveals a balance between local music consumption and markets that may, be more open to foreign music as well. So really, really interesting dynamics going on there. And I encourage you to go look at the interactive and the download version for more on these topics and the other regions too. All right, so I'm going to move sections now, and we're going to talk about profiles of tomorrow's superfans. Really, really excited about this. One of the things that we've heard in the industry conversation lately is that it seems like you only have average music listeners and then super fans and nothing in between. But when you start to go through it, there is a fan engagement funnel. There are different levels to this and different levels of fandom. And Lexi, I can't wait for you to take us through this.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So like Jamie mentioned, we focus a lot on superfans. We spent a lot of time talking about them, looking into them, because they're so valuable. But there's also a lot of value at the higher parts of the funnel. So between general music listeners and superfans. So we took a look, we parsed them out into different tiers, and we have now 3 additional categories. So to start it off with casual fans, these are people who have a free or ad-supported account on a streaming platform. These folks are making a choice to be engaged with music. They have an account, but they haven't yet made the jump to like a monetarily valuable consumer. But that's where we get into an active fan. So an active fan is somebody who is paying for music in some capacity. So they're either paying for a streaming account or they're buying physical music. So they've committed to the industry. They take music seriously. They enjoy it. They're listening to almost 15 hours of music a week. And they also have music happening, in the background and while they're doing things in their lives. Next, we have an engaged fan. So an engaged fan is somebody who takes that next step where music is a part of who they are. They are more likely to say that music influences their fashion and their other behaviors. And they're also 48% more likely to attend a live music event. So these people are a very valuable group in and of itself.
Fantastic. And I really enjoy that you picked out some of the beliefs and some of the attitudes too. And I think it's fascinating, and we've got some more of those in the downloadable version of the report as well to dive into. But any strategies on helping to move fans further down the funnel? I know that's really important.
Yeah. So with superfans, we've talked about them a lot, but they are folks who are making time and financial commitments to their music fandom. And so to do that, there's a lot of opportunity to either create a limited time offer or some type of bundle that's a lower financial commitment, but really does get them in the door as a paying fan. With those, it can also create some urgency and make people more likely to take that small step and unlock the doors and making them more closer to being a super fan.
Oh, excellent. And let's talk a little bit about gaming too. At Luminate, we're really incredibly excited to have a new interactive gaming, interactive on-demand metric now, which is from gaming. And this is streaming that is in-game streaming where a user engages with music in a new way. We just debuted this metric the first week of the second quarter, and we've already got close to 200 million global interactive on-demand streams,
Wow.
which is just fantastic. Lexi, can you tell us a little bit about the gaming community too?
Yeah, so in tandem with the new gaming data that Jamie just mentioned that we're collecting, we also have audience insights data to help color who, where, and why is happening. And we also have it globally. So here we have a couple different profiles for gamers from different countries. And what we've noticed are a couple key demographic shifts, changes. So we see that there's a slight inclination towards male gamers, but it's not by much. It's 54 to 55%. So the female gaming community should definitely not be underestimated, which I think is a cool finding. Also, Canadian and German gamers frequently engage with social media, while UK gamers are more likely to discover music through short-form video platforms. So again, those nuances in the different communities is really important when you're trying to figure out how to reach them, who to reach, and what they're up to.
Awesome. Now let's also talk about another form of engagement that is, we've talked about even in this presentation too. Let's talk about streaming viewership on demand and music documentaries.
Yeah, so we've been mentioning sync a lot lately. So there's a lot of opportunities going on lately with the intersection of film, TV, gaming, music. And so in these examples, there's been a lot of music documentaries, specifically in the list here with the data that we've gotten from our streaming viewership model from the SVM side of the business. We can see the top 10 films that prominently feature either legacy or catalog artists. And what this has done is it's really enhanced the listenership for these artists that are featured. And it's allowed for new audiences to discover them and for old audiences to tap into that reminiscent nostalgia again. So it's a really powerful way to grow an audience, to kind of reinvigorate the old audience and get that music playing again.
Yeah, and let's talk about Led Zeppelin. So Becoming Led Zeppelin is the #1 music doc of the first half of this year. And we did a little bit of a dive here. And the film actually propelled Led Zeppelin to its largest global on-demand audio streaming week ever.
Wow.
Right? This is an iconic band who has no problems with mindshare, is at the top of a lot of lists, and you can also see how, this cross-media, transmedia event just continued to fuel activity. And another thing I'm going to call out about the Led Zeppelin graph that we're looking at too is that sustain, right? Mm-hmm. So, the documentary has so far led to a sustained 24% increase in weekly streams. So number one, helped achieve their highest ever streaming week. Number two, it looks to be sustaining. And that's great news for them, and also shows how these can really impact iconic artists as well. Okay, so superstars. Lexi, let's talk about the artist spectrum. And one thing I find so fascinating about this section is sort of the quantitative metric to stardom.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So in this section, so we've talked about our Illuminate Index before, but a little refresher on the methodology. The Illuminate Index measures artists and gives them a score from 1 to 100, and it's specifically meant to gauge their star power and influence. So there are 5 components to what goes into the index, and that is first the streaming footprint, which is the majority of the score at 30% and comes directly from our proprietary ODS consumption data here at Illuminate. Second is the social media footprint. So we're looking at their followership on Instagram and TikTok to see how wide their fan base is and how engaged their fan base is. The next 3 are components come from our survey data. So first is artist awareness, just getting a lay of the land to see how well they are known amongst the general population. Second is public perception, which looks at their likability scores, and that takes into account both positive and negative scores to gauge how well received they are to the general population. And finally, we have the engagement scores, and that takes a look at a couple factors of whether people would tune in to see them on TV or buy a ticket to a live stream or a live event, and their general brand endorsement power.
Excellent. So let's take a look at how this mapping works.
Yeah, so this funnel is new, and we're really excited about isolating these 6 different segments where we can take the Illuminate Index and establish these thresholds for different levels of star power. By creating the tiers with our index scores, we've also overlaid a delineation of time from when people have released or artists have released their new music. And from that, we have these 6 groups. Why is this segmentation important for the industry? First and foremost, it's an objective evaluation. So it takes all the personal preference out of play, and you're able to compare artists to one another based on their reach and general score.
One other thing I like too, if I can, just for a second, is that because you guys do this quarterly, you're actually going to be able to see artists move up towards level, like through the levels of stardom, which is just fantastic.
Yeah, and we've actually already seen some shifts, and you can see that in the report and in our Illuminate Index data. But we've seen artists that have either gone on tour or came out with new music, and they move in the ranks. So it's definitely a malleable list. Another important application of this data is for identifying the lower level artists. So they have the opportunity to grow and rise to be the superstars. So superstars are the top tier artists. They are household names. They have really high consumption, and so their scores are 80 and above. But superstars, there are also new superstars. So some recent additions to the list are Sabrina Carpenter and Jelly Roll. And they are now in the upper echelon with Beyonce's, the Taylor Swifts of the world. Again, this provides a data-driven approach to recognize that top-tier talent. And it's also important to know if you're planning on some type of sponsorship or branding opportunity that the artists in this category are going to be really widespread, but also probably on the more expensive side to work with. So that takes us to our next section, which I'm really excited about, which is that emerging artist tier. These artists are, they're just getting started. Their music, or the majority of their music, comes from the last 3 years, and they are building their awareness. They're building their brand. So they have less than a 60 score on the index, but that can come from a bunch of different factors. Some of the artists that I'm looking at in this group are Caroline Polachek and V's. And identifying these artists as they're emerging it can be very powerful. You know, we don't really know who they're going to be yet in the next coming years, but getting sponsorships and working with them at this lower level has exponential growth opportunity, because they could be future stars. So these are the folks that we're calling out as the ones to watch.
Amazing. Excellent. Well, that brings us to our last trend, and this is future in focus. So we're actually just going to do some quick hits. And again, you know, if you go to the report, you can find out more about the artist segments that we just went through, but then there's also additional detail on here. So we're just going to do a couple quick hits on some trends to keep an eye on throughout the rest of 2025. So Lexi, I'm first going to throw it to you. Tell us a little bit about festivals.
Yeah, so festivals have been changing a lot over the last couple of years. And in our data, we've seen that the scores have declined a little bit when it comes to intent, especially compared to 2022. But if you look at the scores from the last year or so, they've actually stabilized quite a bit, which is good news. I think that seeing the numbers stabilize, it makes it easier to plan, to strategically make choices on who's actually going to go to festivals, and where to invest. So something that we've also seen with festivals, which is in the report, is the international festival attendance versus the U.S. And UK specifically has really seen growth in festival attendance, especially among the Gen Z folks. So I think that there's a lot to be learned from those types of festivals and that type of work. So, festivals is definitely something we're going to be keeping an eye on in the future.
Excellent, excellent. And a topic that has really picked up over the last couple of weeks is AI, generative AI in particular, and then also how this is impacting consumption. There's been a couple of really high-profile news stories with some artists like the Velvet Sundown and then Aventhus as well. And so let's just take a couple pieces of data here from our data set and talk about AI a little bit. So in terms of consumer research, we find that 1 in 3 U.S. music listeners are actually comfortable or somewhat, they're either very or somewhat comfortable with generative AI instrumentals. Mm-hmm. It's not listed here, but we also see that younger generations, Gen Z, younger the generation seem to be a little bit more comfortable with this than older generations. I do want to call out, though, that when we start to get into things like AI voices or fully AI-generated songs, we start to see that 44% are either somewhat or very uncomfortable with that overall. However, you can also see on the graph that this varies by genre fans, right? So EDM and K-pop fans are a little bit more open to AI voices in the music. Very, very important. And then obviously, AI artists have been making a lot of news lately, but then also have been making and driving a lot of streaming volume. So here we have Aventhus and his overall global on-demand streams there, and it's over 5 million since April 18th, I think. So, obviously a lot of the AI conversation is around copyright. There's a lot of, legislative measures as well. But we're seeing audience respond in different ways, and we are seeing artists use AI in different ways as well, as they, start to drive activity. So very, very important and interesting, to say the least, trend to watch over the next several years, but especially in the short term, right?
Yeah.
Well, that brings us to the end of today's presentation. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to encourage you to please go to luminatedata.com, download the PDF, view the interactive version, watch the data come to life. Also, while you're at luminatedata.com, you can find out all about our services, about our products, and if you have a question about any of this, please reach out to us as well, and anybody would be happy to connect with you. Lexi, thank you so much for joining today.
Thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun going through it all with you.
Yeah, this has been great. Well, thank you again, and see you next time.